Welcome to Wire Guilds. This tutorial is for a ring, and it's a little bit like the channel set rings that you get. The idea is that you've got these beads that are in a long straight line and you've bordered them around them. Now I've used some 1mm or 18 gauge round wire, some little bit of 0.4, some 21 gauge half round for binding, and the little 2 to 3mm flattened beads. Now one of the differences on this is that the ends of this wire have been balled. A little bit of dirt on there, can you just see that? And there. And I've done that with a torch. Now I've added a new skill set video so you can check out how to do the balling there. So this piece of wire is approximately 9-10 inches long. What I tend to do is I will ball a load of these and then just use bits and pieces. Now we are going to use a second bit of wire later, and I'm going to use these little labradorite beads. You can see they've got a little flash of fire in them, but they're only small. They may be 2 or 3 millimeters, and hence have a really tiny hole in them. Because of the tiny holes in the middle, you're not going to be able to get them on a normal wire. So I'm going to use some finer wire. Now this is 0.4, which I think is 26 gauge, and I'm just going to wrap this around roughly the middle of the piece of my wire. Obviously you won't be able to thread a bead on this anyway because we've balled the ends, so you've sort of ruined it for doing that. So you need the finer wire, and I've wrapped it round and I've closed that wrap up with my fingers so it's nice and neat. And on the other end I'm going to pop some beads. Now I'm going to use 5 because I really like odd numbers. They seem to sit better than an even number, but it will depend on the size of your beads. If your beads are a little bit bigger than mine, you may need to use just 3. This is great with little squidged pearls. It looks really lovely. Now I'm going to lay, I'm just easing. Can you see how, if I put that there and pull it down, can you see how that bottom bead sort of dives off to one side? Well, we don't want that. We want them all to stand up. So I'm easing the wire so as I pull it down, can you see how it sits? Lovely. And then I'm going to wrap it around the other end of the wire. We want these beads to be flat. Now I'm going to show you throughout the course of the tutorial one of the 2 of the things that do go wrong with this. However, I'll show you how to put them right. So I want that to sit flat to the wire, so I'm going to shove it and press those together and then close it down. It needs to be tightened. Now the easy way to do this is if I put the pliers on and then twist the whole thing in a circle, it will tighten the wire, or sort of twist against the beads like that. And what it does is it tightens it. Now because it's tightened again, they've gone a little bit in the middle, like a little caterpillar trying to crawl down the wire. So I'm going to flatten that out, but now it's tight. Let's just get rid of this little tail end. So I will trim that off. We don't squash it down, remember, you put the pliers over the top and twist, and that smooths that wire over, far less likely to catch or ever lift. So I'm just making sure that these beads are where I want them. And once you are, you'll need your ring mandrel. Obviously you will have already decided what size you're making, you'll have marked your ring mandrel, you'll know where you're working. I'm going to put the beads on the top. I've still got this long length of wire, ignore that. I'm going to take the wires down, bring them up, go past, and the same with the other side. It really is difficult with the mandrel underneath the camera. See if I can manage with it off. Now the idea is that we're going to pull one wire around one side of the beads. Now this is one of the things that goes wrong with this, because I'm going to have to put it back on. It's no good. Slide it back on the mandrel, easy to work on there. When you do this and you put your wires round and you tend to pull them tight, it's automatic, it's what you do. Now let me show what that has done to the beads. They've gone bloop and they've popped up in the middle, which is no good. So I'm going to undo that, straighten that piece of wire out, and I'm going to push my beads back down. There we go. So now that I've got them straightish, I just need to come here. I'm actually putting my nail into the wire that I wrapped around the thicker wire, and I'm pulling it so that it will stretch it out. This is one of those things that goes wrong, so it's just easier if I point it out to you and show you how to fix it, rather than just ignore the fact and assume that everybody will do it perfectly, because it doesn't happen like that. So this time, when I wrap the wires around, I don't want to pull it tight, so I lay it down to where it's going to be. I'm almost holding it with one hand and come here. Just going to straighten that bit, it's a little kinked. That was what I get for doing it wrong first time, but you can straighten it up easy enough. There. Now back on the mandrel, holding the beads so they stay down and flat, and push the wire around. This means that your wire has now gone around both ends of your beads, but you haven't pulled them tight and squidged them up. There we go. That's a basis, if you like, of our ring. Now I'm going to make sure now that the beads and the ring all stay put. So all I'm doing is I'm wrapping around a couple of times on one side of the ring shank by passing it through the middle. Sorry, let me just shift my hands a little. And then I'm going to go to the other side and wrap a couple of times around there. So it's like a figure of 8. And what I'm doing is I am making sure that those two wires don't separate at that point. If you wanted, and you had more wire than I've got, you could do this all the way around the ring shank, and it would look quite pretty. It would hold it together. I aren't a fan of just the two wires on rings. They don't sell as well. They've never sold as well. I don't know whether people see the two separate wires and think, you know what, that doesn't look very well finished off, so I'm not paying for it. I don't know. But I know that they're always far more popular when they're held together, bound, woven, but some way, you know. So I am just backwards and forwards in, and I will probably do this just another couple of times. I'm trying to get just a little bit of strength. We've only got one wire here. It's a lightweight ring. However, even if it's a lightweight ring, you don't want it to be flimsy. So I'm getting strength in there at the edge. Using my pliers, put them over the top of the ring shank, slide those weaving wires up. Now, I haven't left myself much wire. I'm going to come up underneath, and I'm going to stitch in between each one of the beads. Just flatten that little piece down there. It's trying to sit up on top, and I don't want it on top, I want it underneath. So I'm going in between the first and the second bead, and then down, pull it through my pliers. I find the shorter the piece of the wire, the more I need to use pliers. If I have a really long piece, it seems to be fine using my fingers, but when I have a little piece like this, when pulling it through, it's sort of easier to do it. Whoops, get on that side. Yeah, it hasn't come through where I want it. On the underneath, I am only really wrapping around, sorry, go through, the wire that we originally put the beads onto. At a pinch, you could do this before you start, so that they stayed down and flat. The reason I don't is because I like to do that little bit of weaving on one side, then I'll stitch in between each of the beads, and then I'll do the same little bit of weaving on the other side. it doesn't make that much difference. And if you found it easier to do the stitching first, I'm sure you could. It's just, personally, I like the extra strength that it gives by just having that one piece of wire doing all three things. Now then, come here. So we'll pop this up again. What you're doing is you're locking the wire that is going through the bead down onto the wire that they're sitting on. You're not actually holding the bead in any way, it's just that wire that's in between. So you don't see this wire, it doesn't show. Now then, pull that tight. When you think about what you're using to actually make the piece of jewellery, that you're only using a few small pieces of wire, anybody in standard jewellery making would be quite horrified, because they would think that it needed a load of solder on it before it was ever going to be strong enough to do anything. This is why all of this bits of weaving and locking together are so important. So I've gone between all of the beads. Now I've got round to the other side of the ring shank, the shank being the round piece that would go around your finger. So I'm going to do the same weaving in and out on this side as I did on the other. So all I'm doing is I'm wrapping round once, go through, wrap around again, and then I'm going to do over the top, down through the middle, so it's like a figure of 8 to the other side. I really didn't leave myself enough wire, but it's alright, it will work. It's just a little fiddly, that's all. And we'll come back. If you're worried about using the ball ends, if you've looked at the skill set and you think, you know what, I don't want to do that, or I don't have a torch, or for whatever reason, you can do this perfectly well with just a normal piece of wire. You just have to make a little tiny loop in the end of the wire so that it wasn't scratchy and it didn't catch on anything, but it would work in exactly the same way. The reason that I do it is it looks kind of pretty. It looks like you've got a little bead fastened to the end, and it's used a lot. There's an awful lot of wire jewellery out there nowadays where people are fusing, maybe fusing is the wrong word, meshing together different styles. They're using wire, they're using standard jewellery making, the soldering parts, the piercing parts, and then they're adding wire over the top. This is a nice way of just adding a little touch of it, but without going too far. And you can buy small torches now, really snip that bit off and then press it down, really quite reasonably, and these little torches are you know, perfectly good for just balling the ends. And you can also do them in cooking as well. You can use a little torch to come here to crisp up the top of things. Right, so I've got my ring, it's feeling firmer, and I've got my two ends of wire that are either side, and I need some detail. Now I've got another piece of wire here. This one's probably about, I don't know, 4 inches, 10 centimetres, and it's a case of what can I do with it. I can pop it through the middle, I can add it over the top, but I'm not going to use it just yet. I will put it on because I want the extra piece, but I'm not going to use it just yet. So I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to bend it back on itself. You're aiming for wire up the side of these beads as if they are sitting in a channel. So you need some height. The best way to get height is to bend the wire so it's at the correct level. So the wire's bent back and I'm making this curl as small as possible so that, whoops, dropped it. Can I do it with my fingers? No, I need to flatten that curl a little bit. It's a little bit too high. If I come back at that point, it's going to be over the top of the beads. So I'm gripping with round nose, get hold of the end and then bend back along the line. Can you see now I've brought that wire almost to the top of the beads? Yeah? Oops. Put your hands back in the camera, Rachel. Sorry, I'm just squeezing it down so that it's a bit firmer. Now I'm going to do the same on the other side. You may have noticed that I've got a little bit more wire on one side than I have on the other. That doesn't make any difference. This is a very sort of free-form, organic. Right then, so that's the other side. I'm giving it a squeeze it up against the beads. So that's a little high. So if I take my pliers and I put them over the top, I can just sit that down, bend it closer, and then push it so that it's flat. Right, so it's parallel lines against the bead. Then I can take the end of it. That one's a bit short. What should we do with it? I'm just going to curl it round. There, you can see, with the end of the pliers. Squidge it down a bit. Now I'm going to get some finer wire here. Let me just trim that off and have another look, because at some point I'm going to need to start and stitch this down. There's my second piece of wire. I'm going to go to one side. I'm about 2/3 of the way along, and I'm going to bend that all the way around. And now I'm going to start and just wiggle it backwards and forwards, make a curl. This is entirely up to you. This is when your creativity will come out. You've got the basis of the ring, you've got the beads in place, you've got the shank in place. What you do with the ends of the wire is, well, it doesn't make any difference to the structure. All the difference is this is your personality that's coming out and coming through, the way you wiggle these wires around. So now I'm just going to stitch. You notice I haven't done anything with the other end yet. I'm going to put this piece of fine wire through that loop that I've made there. I'm going to wrap it a couple of times around the balled end, because of course it's not going to slip off because you've got this lump. If you'd have put a curl in the wire, it would work just the same way. Just tighten that other end down so it's not going to slip off anywhere. Right, so that's holding that piece. So the other end will have a curl in it. A lot of the times I do curls freehand rather than using pliers. I like the fact that they just go wherever they want. And I'm just going to curl that further into the ring. Oops. Who doesn't want to be got hold of? And I'm just twisting that end around. You feel your way with this. There can be a temptation to add lots and lots of extra pieces of wire. You've got your one basic piece, and then you start and you add another, and you think, you know what, I need to add another, and you end up losing the beads that are in the middle. Just less is more sometimes. So all I'm doing now is I am working my way around the ring with the finer wire. Anywhere where it looks like a piece of wire could lift or move or maybe anything. We want structure, we want firmness. You want to be able to know that if you put your hands in to do the washing up and you're wearing this ring, or if you put a sweater on, it's not going to catch. You want all those loose ends neatly sort of sewn in. So just backwards and forwards. You can use this as extra detail if you go around several times, because you've got the binding going around the other way. You can try and hide this. You can go in from underneath, come up and just put a single loop around, then go back down underneath so it's not seen. But can you see how that bit there is just Yeah, that's it. Going around. It's bouncing around all over the place, is this? Let me just get that in there. A lot of the time when you make something, it's the confidence of making it, finishing it, and going, yes, this is the finished thing. Not looking at it and saying, maybe I didn't do it right. This is how it is. This is how it's turned out. As if you almost pass over the responsibility to it and say, this is what you are. It's freeing in a way, because then you can make things and enjoy them for exactly what they are. They may not be exactly what you thought they were going to be. To me, it's a little bit like children. You get children and you get what they are, not always what you thought they were going to be. And you love them anyway. Making your own jewellery can be a lot like that. You tend to you tend to get what you're given, and not always, what you thought you wanted. And you put it on your finger and you live with it for a day or two, and you end up loving it. And that's the best bit. So I'm working around. These bald ends are handy because, like I say, you can just wrap around the bottom of them. Now, I'm all the way around. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to anchor it and finish it back through the ring shank. Make sure it's tucked tight and smoothed in. You can be quite firm with the wire as long as you don't bend it in the same spot repeatedly. Otherwise you'll work hard on it, you'll crack the wire, and it'll there's another loose bit there. I'm going to come around this side and I'm just going to pop through that to hold it down. Go in. Do that. There we go. I'm not a loose curl person. I'm always very, very worried about having any loose curls. Sorry, I hit myself then. Loose curls or swirls, because I'm always worried that they're going to catch on something or get pulled. And I've been making jewellery for sort of many, many years and selling it, and I always offer people a lifetime guarantee, my lifetime basically. Obviously if I'm not around anymore I can't fix it. So I'm always worried that if something is loose and not as strong as it could be, there is the possibility that the customer will come back and say, it's going. Will you go through there? Oh, come on, you've got to go through somewhere. If you can't get it through, like I can't get it through there, you can ease a spot with your fingers and find your way through. There we go. I'm in. I actually quite like it when it gets to the point where I can't get the wire through, because I know that if I can't get the wire through, we're getting to the point where everything's really tight and firm. In we go. I don't know if you noticed how springy this wire is that I'm using, but I'm actually using sterling silver wire instead of fine silver. The difference being sterling silver is 925 silver and fine silver is 999. And the result of that is that the wire is super springy, and I am definitely having more trouble with it. However, I did a sort out the other day and I had a box of materials that desperately needed using up. They've been out in one of my sheds for some time, so they're all getting used up now. Let's have a look. How are we? Yeah, that's much better. It's but that one there, that little blob, is that moving? No, trim that. So once you know you're safe, once you know everything's secure, you can trim off and press down. Now what I'm going to do is just move that out of the way so it looks better, is I'm going to give this a very, very light oxidation. Not much at all, but it will show the details up a little bit better. So I'm watering my platinol, which is what I use, down, and I'm going to give that a wash and we'll have a look at it then. So this is my oxidized ring, and as you can see it's very, very lightly oxidized, but it just pulls up the details. Now the only thing that I'm not thrilled about is the shank. So let me have a look. I thought maybe when I'd oxidized it I might like it better, but I don't. So I'm going to bind it. So I've got some 21 gauge half hard, half round wire. Any half round wire will do. If you've got 18 gauge, that's fine. I wouldn't suggest much heavier than 18 gauge because it's just too hard to use. When I'm binding any ring shank, I start in the middle of my piece of wire. I put a bend in, and then I'm wrapping with the flat side. If you think of the wire as being like a half circle or a D shape, that flat edge is going on the inside of the ring, and I'm binding round. If you want to see me doing this more slowly and more clearly, because my hands keep dropping out of shot, sorry about that, there is a skill video on binding which shows you how to do it, but I tend to just wrap around a couple of times, especially on a ring, and then I will press that down with the pliers to make sure that it's nice and flat. As long as you pull it, pulling is probably the wrong word. You're almost laying it, pulling it flat, laying it over what you're hoping for. You've only got 2 wires, so it's not that bad, and then you just flatten down with the pliers. I don't know whether you can see, but this binding wire is absolutely tarnished to death. I'm just going to finish that off. There's no point in you watching me do that. You can. So here we go. I've gone all the way around the ring, and I'm right up to finishing off at the edges now. In my very, very dirty binding wire, but it doesn't matter. It'll clean. Don't worry. Pass it through. When I cut this off, I'll cut this off on the outside of the ring, not on the inside. I try and make all my cuts on rings external, because when you put your finger in, the last thing that you want to do with your finger in there is get scratched. So tight as I can, cut it off on the top, smooth it down. Now let's give this a right good rub. What I'll do is I'll give it a good rub with the polishing cloth, and then I will also give this a light oxidation, and then it will either get thrown in the tumbler or it will get polish on the mop, and there we go. Channel set, or giving the illusion of a channel set ring. Shank's nice and bound. Can't wait to see what you've made. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping.